So a wise crowd or a mad herd? These two topics relate to the psychology of group decision-making and group dynamics. So you look at that psychological research and say, well, do individuals make better decisions than teams, or teams make better decisions than individuals? And the evidence is, or at least my reading of the evidence is, it's quite mixed. So at one extreme you've got decisions made by groups that can be quite poor. So you get things like group think, for example, the mad herds of people who might come to decisions that none of the individuals, if you left them to their own devices, would have made on their own. So that's at one extreme, but at the other extreme you get things like the wisdom of crowds. You end up with sort of collaborative, synergistic, cognitively diverse teams who can make decisions that are sometimes better than any of their individual members had you let those people make choices on their own. So you've got these two extremes, and the purpose of these two sessions is to say, well, what do we understand, what can we understand about what can go wrong and what can go right in group decisions from a psychological perspective. So the first topic focuses on the what can go wrong part. So we look there at things like cascades, where one thing leads from another to another. We look at things like hidden profiles, which is a term that just effectively means stuff that doesn't get disclosed in meetings, that gets hidden from groups, and if it was known to the group, they would make better choices. We look at how biases, the individual biases of team members can be, well, not overcome, but also sometimes perpetuated and sometimes even accentuated in a group decision-making environment. And we also look at why is it difficult sometimes to judge people's expertise and to understand their perspective and incorporate that into a decision. So that's all the stuff that can go wrong, and then we, in the second session, we look at, well, what's some of the stuff that can go right and how can we understand that? So in the second session, we're looking at things like different variations on the wisdom of crowds. When do they work? What are some of the permutations that are likely to increase the accuracy of decisions, and when can they be used? We're looking at things like cognitive diversity. What do we really mean by different? What does cognitive diversity mean? What types of diverse thinking can lead to better decisions? What are some of the barriers to incorporating those diverse views, perspectives, heuristics, ways of thinking in a team environment? And how can you overcome them? So ultimately we're trying to then say, what are some of the solutions to the problems at one end, and how can we sort of foster this sort of positive synergistic thinking or wisdom of the crowd's version at the other end. And some of the solutions relate to cultural norms and expectations about, do people feel comfortable to challenge others and be challenged, for example. Some of it relates to leadership. Some of it relates to team decision-making processes, about sort of sharing information, for example. So there's a range of solutions that work at both ends of the spectrum. Each of the sessions runs for about 60 minutes, which includes plenty of time for discussion, which there typically is in these types of sessions. There's also a mini group exercise that people tend to enjoy that I have up front in the first session, which then has a range of implications that people can see. What I do is I ask people to make an assessment individually, and then to collaborate as teams, put all the answers on the whiteboard, and you can start to see some of the dynamics and some of the issues and opportunities coming out from that little exercise. So two topics, the good and the bad, I guess, of group decision making, and ultimately what I'm aiming for is that people come away with a better appreciation of what can go wrong and what can go right from a psychological perspective in team discussions, and therefore what are some of the strategies they can employ either as individuals in a team environment or potentially as team leaders, leaders of their own group decision making environments.